It is my privilege to invite you to watch our Amgen Massachusetts site virtual video.
We take things from early phase 1 trials. We develop a process for how to manufacture our drugs.
We have the synthetic scale-up lab where we can demonstrate our processes on larger scale so that we can better understand those processes.
These labs here are really where the action happens. This is where we transform molecules into medicines.
We really focus on the technology. We really look at what does the future of manufacturing look like? What is available on the shelf now for use? And what are vendors actually working on that we can give them feedback to kind of guide them in the direction that we need to go as a pharmaceutical industry in general.
You never go to work and think, why am I going to work today? It's always, why, and you feel great about it.
Good morning and welcome to this month's edition of Policymakers Live. We are so thrilled to have Congresswoman Lori Trahan with us this morning. This is our first Policymakers Live of 2021, and I couldn't ask for a better guest to talk about a number of timely issues going on in DC and in her district in Massachusetts. Welcome, Congresswoman.
Zach, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
We are hosting these events on a monthly basis now, and we found as we've moved to virtual last year, and hopefully we're going to not do virtual much longer, but these virtual events have allowed us to connect with policymakers both in Massachusetts and in DC on a real nice informal basis. It's not a fundraiser, and it's an opportunity for us all to engage with each other, and also for those not necessarily in government affairs as a full-time job from the Mass Bio community to meet with elected officials as well, something that we're happy to provide an avenue for. I want to start today by thanking Amgen and Synovian for sponsoring today's event. You saw Amgen's great video, and Synovian, thank you. Congresswoman Trahan, you are serving in your second term representing the Third Congressional District. I want to talk about some of the issues going on in your district during today's event, but also congratulations for being given this role on the Energy and Commerce Committee. That is a huge honor, and I know you're dealing with a number of very important issues already on that committee.
Yes, there's no question this committee is already cooking with gas. We've had a number of hearings across the subcommittees, excuse me, that I sit on, healthcare, consumer protection, and oversight and investigation. So really thrilled to be on the committee. I'm the only member from Massachusetts serving on this committee, and it's just it's enormous opportunity. So thrilled and thrilled to work with you all in the weeks, months, and years ahead.
Yeah, you are just another example of the power of the Massachusetts Congressional Delegation and how strong we are and the important and amazing leadership positions you hold across the delegation. This has been a really strange start to the year. I wanted to just start with a very easy question. How are you? How are things in the district? How's DC treating you so far?
Oh, well, thank you for that question. It's been a challenging start to the year. It's been a challenging year, I think, for all of us. But, certainly I've got 5 kids. I've got, 27, 24, 22-year-old boys. I've got 6 and 10-year-old daughters. And so, we've had to make a lot of adjustments in our, daily routines. And, I think a lot of families have had to do that. And certainly, I think one thing that this year has really laid bare is sort of the disparities that we're seeing in our communities. I mean, I grew up in Lowell, and I represent communities like Lawrence and Haverhill, Methuen, and Fitchburg. And, we are seeing that we need to start everything that we do needs to be looked at through an equity lens, which is so important. And so, just like this past year has been challenging for so many, it's also, sort of showed us that, innovation and there are some silver linings that we should be investing in, whether it's telehealth and broadband, or how we get our vaccines out to our communities that have been underrepresented for so long. I'm just really happy that that is all being that's all at the forefront of our policy conversations.
Absolutely. There's no doubt that this year has laid bare some of the interesting problems that we now face in a really immediate way, whether it's childcare, education, or equity issues. I know the E&C committee had a hearing last week, and you got to hear from Dr. Fauci about some issues. And one of the issues I know that you specifically talked with him about was childcare and mental health as a result of COVID. I'd like to hear your thoughts a little bit about those issues.
Yes, well, I don't think that you have to be a mom to know that this has been an incredibly tough year, and children of all ages. And certainly, I think we need to recognize that we need to do the research to figure out how harmful this past year has been on all of our children, whether it's our elementary school children or our college or high school age children. I just introduced a bill with Representative Cardenas on giving funding to preventing youth suicide. We've had some tragic deaths across not just my district, but Massachusetts. And it's time that HHS, directly grant our school districts with, prevention and awareness programs so that we really get at that, rising rate of youth suicide. But certainly mental health is something that we're going to understand more, I think, in the months ahead, and programs that we're going to have to create so that we meet that crisis head on. And we've already had some great hearings in terms of what telemedicine can do for mental health appointments. We've seen even in our underserved communities that no-shows and the rate of no-shows go down when you're able to access telemedicine. And I think that's the reason why making broadband ubiquitous is such a huge part of the conversation right now, and likely to be a focal point of our infrastructure package.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I mean, our pediatrician said that he's done more mental health referrals for his practice the last 12 months than he's done in his whole career. I mean, it's just the pressingness and nature of this issue is just unbelievable.
And I'll even add, I mean, I think moms right now are the ones who are confronting that disproportionately more than anyone else right now, using whatever tools that we have. But that also, lays bare the number of women we've lost from our workforce, the number of moms we've had leave the workforce, over 1 million, because prioritizing our children, making sure that our children are on solid footing and that they're prioritized and adjusting to this past year has just been a role, of course, the moms are going to step into. But we have to ensure that when we think about this economic recovery, we're thinking about getting moms and women back to work, which is another reason why the focus and the conversation is on, saving our childcare system from the brink of collapse. So.
Yeah, it's such a critical issue, and the data around mothers leaving the workforce is really horrifying because it's hard to make up that ground once you leave the workforce in terms of advancement and gender equity. The one bright spot that we've seen, especially from the life sciences industry, is around innovation. I mean, the COVID vaccines are a real story of innovation that is being called a miracle, but I think it's important to recognize the work that went into the development of these drugs decades up until this. I mean, you think about mRNA research has been going on for a decade, somewhat under the radar as an unproven medical technology. You think about the work around the original SARS virus, that all led us here to be able to create these vaccines in record time and really bring back some sense of normalcy. And I feel like there's finally light at the end of the tunnel. We're very proud of Massachusetts' role in that. 95 plus companies here who 12 months ago were not doing anything related to COVID are pivoted as quickly, and we're making diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. And all the vaccines that have been approved so far have a Massachusetts connection. I guess I'm looking for advice from you as we're working in DC as an industry and talking to members of Congress. What would you suggest we approach the education process, especially as it relates to issues around drug pricing?
Well, first I have to say that I am proud to be from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, especially as we have these hearings on our contribution to crushing this virus. I mean, the Commonwealth is the home to so many incredible, innovative life science businesses. And I'm particularly pleased that a number of them are located right in the Third Congressional District. In Mass Bio, each of them has a powerful and sophisticated advocate at the state and federal levels of government. And so, one, thank you for all that you do on behalf of our life sciences sector. As you said, the industry really did step up to the plate when it counted. There is just no question that the life sciences sector proved yet again to be heroes and our miracle workers, not just for the American people, but for the entire world. And your rapid innovation in response to the crisis really demonstrated how skilled and dedicated the workforce is and how invaluable your industry is to the Commonwealth and the nation. The fact is, it was just 15 months ago, very few of us had ever heard of COVID, let alone imagine the enormous harm it would do to so many families and communities, taking our loved ones prematurely and robbing so many of their livelihoods, paralyzing, entire industries. But it is thanks in large part to your members that our nation is pulling through. And it's remarkable that the life sciences industry has been able to discover 3 safe and effective vaccines with another possibly on the way. So to your question, we absolutely must maintain the collaborative spirit between private industry and government that was born out of necessity this past year. My great worry is that we will ease off the gas and allow the old status quo to return with everyone headed back to their silos. And we shouldn't allow a return to normal to also mean a return to under-equipped and under-informed. We need ongoing engagement and routine education, lifelong learning, so to speak, between government and industry. So I think our efforts to sustain what has been built will have enormous benefit. First, hopefully it will help to diffuse or at least temper some of the partisanship that we've seen emerge around medical advice, especially vaccinations, and restore trust in our public health system. Candidly, I don't think that it's my side of the aisle that's been the driver of making vaccinations or even mask wearing partisan, but be that as it may, we still need to maintain open lines of communication and rebuild trust in our public health system, as well as, the validity of the FDA approval process. So I do think your industry's engagement is crucial to achieving that level of trust. Second, if we're able to skip past the partisan politics and start off on the right foot with the public and private sectors working together, that opens the door to greater readiness. I don't want us to, to borrow a cliche, fighting the lasting war. The next pandemic could be of an entirely different stripe, but regardless, there will be another highly contagious virus. And it could be just as deadly or even more so than COVID. So building up the trust muscle today affords us the ability to be faster out of the blocks the next time there is need to implement local, state, or nationwide public health and safety protocols. We have, Americans, maybe more so in the Bay State, we have a naturally strong independent streak. And, that tendency towards defiance has probably been with us since the Boston Tea Party, but I don't expect us to give that up. I think it's embedded in our culture, but restoring trust in science is absolutely essential. And I do think that right now, too many of us are living in a parallel universe in which COVID is made up of, false flag operation concocted by, the Democrats to defeat Donald Trump. I mean, there are just many people who truly believe that, and a whole bunch of them call my office, routinely. So we have to diffuse that. And so I do think that a big part of that is working together and educating our constituencies. So lastly, the thing I will say about where our collaboration is most crucial and we have a lot to address is in our supply chain. The pandemic revealed some dangerous gaps from raw materials to finished goods. And I don't think it's wise to have to wait on, foreign suppliers to respond to a public health crisis. One of the reasons why I started the Pandemic Preparedness Caucus is that we don't let amnesia set in to our policy making. I know that sometimes Congress, once we move out of a crisis, we don't wring out the lessons and ensure that we are better prepared next time. But whether it's our, reliance on a foreign supply chain or not having a health security stockpile where, we have vaccines and antigens and PPE and whatever else is necessary for us to not be caught flat-footed and to respond quickly, I think is a good use of federal investment. We have that for our national security. I believe we need that for our public health security as well.
What a great idea. And, government, as you know well, is not good at looking ahead sometimes. And I think that idea of a pandemic preparedness caucus makes so much sense. I know you've heard from our friends at MassMedic and a lot of the med device companies that were able to pivot quickly this year, whether it's into things like PPE or ventilators, and that's going to continue. The good news is that's not going away. We saw last week, big announcement from Thermo Fisher partnering to create a new supply chain for masks. I mean, that's amazing. It's something that never would have happened a year ago. So thank you for leading those efforts. I'm curious on the education front, expanding a little bit on what you were talking about. How do you think vaccine rollout in your district is going? I know you have a diverse district in a number of ways, and I'm curious what you're hearing from your constituents and how that's going up there.
Yes, well, it's very important right now that the American Recovery Plan and some of the pieces that were included in that plan, really do address the disparities that we're seeing across so many of our communities. I mean, I've been able to champion our community health centers. Just as an example, in really meeting communities that have traditionally been underserved, where they are. We know we've got broadband issues so that the online registrations aren't meeting the need. We have transportation issues, so mass vaccination sites don't really accommodate folks who are constrained. And so we needed to arm our community health centers and our community hospitals even with the tools to go to where their patients are. And I saw that up close. I went to the Greater Lawrence Family Health Center just a few weeks ago as they received, their first 2,000 doses from the federal vaccination plan. And it was emotional to see every seat full. Not only, the folks who were there to get that shot and, be that step closer to being with their families and their friends and their loved ones, but to see the frontline heroes who have just gone through the most exhausting and traumatizing year, be able to serve their patients in a very hopeful and optimistic way. It was a tearful moment, I think, for everybody in the room. And so we definitely have to make sure that we are investing in the programs that are going to get communities like Lawrence and Lowell and Haverhill vaccinated. And I think that is where so much of our effort right now from a federal perspective and also from a state perspective is ensuring that this vaccine is being distributed equally to all of our communities. So there's still more work ahead, and I think that's where collaboration is so key in making sure that we get it right, making sure we're getting over whatever hurdles we have in terms of vaccine hesitancy or reluctance. But it's nice to see an administration that's very much focused on getting the shots in the arms of everybody in all of our communities.
Yeah, and it's very exciting as part of the American Relief Act to see that funding in there to do some vaccine education and try to get those numbers up across, especially under this underserved communities. I want to encourage everybody who is attending today to ask questions into the chat function on YouTube. They'll be passed straight to us. So if you have any pressing questions for the Congresswoman, please send them along. I'd like to talk a little bit about manufacturing. I know you're a member of the House Dem Manufacturing Caucus, and biomanufacturing is a big growth area in Massachusetts right now. Even in your district, we've seen two recent announcements in Boxborough for the openings of 2 biomanufacturing facilities actually in the same building. Viva Logics and Aranta Bio are both going to build out biomanufacturing sites there. We're really excited at Mass Bio about the opportunities biomanufacturing brings to the state, and especially to areas outside of the traditional Cambridge-Boston cluster.
Yeah.
And I think to further that a little bit, workforce development opportunities are great too. You don't need a PhD to work in a biomanufacturing facility. So it really expands that workforce pool. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about manufacturing in general, and coming from Lowell, how you think about that and how biomanufacturing may tie into that.
Absolutely. And I think it's a very exciting time for Massachusetts to think about our return to and our investment in manufacturing. And certainly we want to see that, east to west corridor that has sort of taken shape across Massachusetts to also stretch north to west, north to south. And I think that there's a lot of collaboration already happening within the Massachusetts delegation to set the conditions for that to happen. Look, there's no question that at the very beginning of this pandemic, what was laid bare was our foreign reliance on our reliance on a foreign supply chain. And it's the reason why there is so much momentum on how do we set the conditions so that we can bring that manufacturing home. And how can we also engage in a public-private partnership, much like we do for our national security, to ensure that we're also, giving growth opportunity to our amazing bio life science industry. And so there's a lot of opportunity, whether it's in the, this infrastructure package, so much of what the president has talked about in terms of making sure that we've got chip production and, we've got to focus on our natural resources, all the components that we need to make sure that we can build American manufacturing back up again is really important. And also, bipartisan. There's no question. You hear that sentiment from both sides. Yesterday we were talking about the Lift America Act that's coming through the full committee, but certainly the energy and environment subcommittees of E&C. And, we want to build, just by way of an example, electronic vehicles and an infrastructure for that. Well, we know that we also need to be able to build batteries here. And that's going to require, an investment in our manufacturing sector. And I think we're going to look at that industry by industry. I think there is a lot of momentum for making sure that we are investing in bringing manufacturing home. I want to see Massachusetts benefit from that. And I'm not alone, right? I am joined with, Chairman Neal, Chairman McGovern, Assistant Speaker Clark, Jake Auchincloss, our newest member. We're all really focused on how do we make sure that Massachusetts is able to benefit from manufacturing coming home, and also really getting down in the details on how do we make sure that our educational system maps to that. Because you bring up a great point, Zach. We don't necessarily need PhDs, but these are great family sustaining jobs. And so we want to make sure that we've got the ecosystem around those investments so that we're constantly building a workforce pipeline using our community colleges, our public universities, even our technical and vocational schools. I think all of that is going to be, a place where we can collaborate and ensure that we're setting the conditions to making this industry continue to grow here.
Absolutely. And that's one of our big objectives this year and going forward is how do we make this cluster more sustainable? We are R&D heavy here, whether it's in Cambridge or it's in Worcester or it's in North Shore or the South Shore. It's generally R&D companies that are growing in Massachusetts, but we are seeing a trend towards biomanufacturing, and that really does lead to better sustainability. It's a bigger workforce, it's a broader swath of people, and it's opportunities that don't exist just in R&D. We're really excited about that. So as we think about expansion outside of Cambridge, Boston, transportation becomes the key word here. Getting to Cambridge, to and from Cambridge is critical because that is where the core of our cluster is. That's where connections happen over coffee It's where job offers happen. It's where partnerships grow in many cases. But we're seeing companies want to be in Watertown and Waltham and Woburn and Lexington and Worcester, all over.
Yeah.
But they need to get here. So we think about transportation, both driving, but more importantly, I think our public transportation system. How is the congressional delegation, you particularly, thinking about that in Massachusetts going forward?
You know, I think that it's such an important issue, and it's one that impacts Massachusetts. We had $1 billion in the mass transit and the American Rescue Plan, but frankly, we know that the reason why our next package is going to be an infrastructure package is because we have to get at the heart of making transportation, more accessible, and it really being the connective tissue of, between people and jobs. So I do think that the Massachusetts delegation, we were just convened, last week to sort of strategize around how we're going to go into these infrastructure conversations, and whether, it's high-speed rail, our investment in electric vehicles, and how we're going to make this package, more green and less carbon. I think all of that is at play. And then we're also going to be, thinking through, like, how has work changed? What are those trends that, weren't there pre-pandemic going to influence and shape the infrastructure package? But there's a lot of transit-oriented development happening in our districts, and we want to make sure that we're poised to make those investments so that that we can see regions like Devon's, everything that's happening in Devon's. We want to see that grow, and we can't do that without a focus on transportation and as well as housing. So I'm really looking forward. They're still taking shape right now. I mean, this infrastructure package is, I think, a huge opportunity for us to really accelerate our economic recovery, but then also for us to make some long overdue investments with an eye towards cutting down our carbon emissions. And I think it's a great opportunity. We should be looking at it that way. We should be thinking about jobs and how we're going to overhaul our transportation infrastructure all across this country. And so I'm really excited that we're thinking boldly about this next package.
It is exciting. You're absolutely right. This whole idea of return to work and the future of work is really fascinating. I mean, our industry is not accepted, but you look at some of the bigger employers inside and outside the life sciences, they're trying to figure out, are their employees coming back to the office? Obviously the life sciences has a disproportional share of people that have to be at work. But if you think about other industries, how do they plan ahead? Is a very interesting and open question, but I think it creates a lot of opportunities, especially as you think around equity, diversity, and inclusion. We know companies that are already hiring full-time remote jobs from people that are out of state. And the talent pool is different in other states. It's bigger because you're looking nationwide for talent now, and it's more diverse.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing for our industry at the end of the day, and something we're really excited about. We have a few more minutes, I know, until you have to go for another meeting, but I wanted to say, if there's any questions out there, we are open for questions. Can
I fill the space just a little bit? And I'm sorry,
please.
But when we think about future to work, I mean, one thing, I worked in tech for a bunch of years. I was the only female executive on our particular executive team. And, I think what we also need to be thinking about as, we plan for the future and bringing women back into the workforce is how we're going to accommodate women in the future of work. I mean, certainly I remember, this is going back a long time, but not too long, 10 years ago when my Grace was born, I had a really hard time, even though I was old. And I think one of the things that we learned from this past year is that we can think differently about where people work and how they work. And I think that should really benefit women, and it should really give them leverage in terms of coming back to the workforce and making sure that the conditions are there for them to thrive and ascend in their jobs. So I'm excited about that.
I love that idea. I mean, you hear about the motherhood penalty all the time, and jobs that require travel often are given to men over women because women are seen, mothers in particular, are seen as not wanting to travel, whether or not that's even true, or if you even ask the candidate in the first place. But you see this world we've lived in over the last year is that deals are being done virtually, business meetings are being done virtually, and seemingly to great success. We need to return to a world where people are traveling 4 days a week for their job. That may be non-existent or dramatically change for some people looking forward.
That's why Massachusetts can take comfort in knowing that we're getting $512 million through the American Rescue Plan for our child care infrastructure, and that will definitely help women get back.
That is very exciting. Well, Congresswoman, thank you very much for your time this morning. This has been enlightening, really exciting conversation. There's so much going on, and I'm glad you are right in the middle of it. The MassBio membership, we have over 1,400 members now. 2/3 of our biotech companies, 600-700 companies have less than 50 employees. We are a small and emerging cluster by and large, but that's where the innovation comes from. It's what we're most proud of. It's why the big companies are coming here to meet that innovation face to face. But they're also the companies that are most at risk for policies that could impact innovation. They are private, they're non-commercial, they're not making any money, and they're doing this all at risk on some of the most tricky and complicated science imaginable. So we thank you for your support of the industry, your open door, your great staff, and again, for doing this today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Nothing gives me more pride than talking about the R&D, the innovation, the investment that we've made in life sciences and hopefully biomanufacturing here in Massachusetts. And so let's continue keeping that open door and that exchange of ideas and also, policy prescriptions. I really do treasure the input that you all have into the biggest decisions that we're going to be making. And so I look forward to working with all of you. And thanks again, Zach, for giving me the chance to chat with you today.
Thank you. This has been great. Thanks again to our sponsors, Amgen and Synovian. Our next Policymakers Live is coming up on April 7th at 10 a.m. with State Senator Julian. We're really looking forward to that, talking to him about some of his patient-focused work in his district. Thank you all again for joining. Thank you, Congresswoman. Have a great day.
Thank you.